You are listening to Down Home.
Humble backgrounds is one of the reasons that me, Jay Jones, and Chad Burns are close friends. We all grew up with family that worked hard to make sure that we had a roof over our heads and that we never went without food or clothing. We may not have been brought up with a lot of material wealth, but we were rich with family and love. In my late teenage years, the roots of our friendships really started to grow. This was also the time when I really started to notice how hard my mother worked to improve our lives by furthering her career. Together with my stepfather, they were able to build a comfortable life for us, a life that looked a lot different to when I was a child. Thank you, Mom and Peter, for all your hard work. In this episode, me, Jay, and Chad talk about our experiences growing up in modest, low-income households. Welcome to Down Home, the Nova Scotian experience from two black men.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground.
Unless some crazy trade comes up.
Whenever we get together, there's always a discussion about sports. Just so happens that this podcast was taped just before the NBA trade deadline, and we were talking about whether or not the Raptors were going to be left intact.
Then you see what you can work with and see how much money you have left. But he's a cornerstone in the franchise.
Well, the other thing is you want to keep Siakam happy, right? And those two guys are
Scotty
good
Barnes.
friends.
Yeah.
Keeping him around.
Yeah.
And they were saying they could get 3 first-round picks from Brooklyn for Anunoby.
Really?
You never know. I mean, he's a hot commodity of that two-way player. But right now he's hurt, so I don't know the extent. I don't know the extent.
Still, though, I think somebody will pick him up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
that's the news.
So we're talking about growing up in a low-income family, which, as you guys know, I think it's relevant these days because of the way interest rates have gone, the price of food as well. There's probably a lot of people out there that are even listening to this podcast that have to make a decision. Okay, well, am I going to pay my mortgage or am I going to buy groceries this week, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, all of us are not in that situation anymore, right? But we kind of grew up in that situation, which is interesting, man. And like thinking back, I was talking to Vanessa about this today. On paper, my family actually sounded good. Like we lived with our grandparents. My grandfather was a structural engineer, which basically worked in boiler rooms, right? And my Aunt Jean was a nurse. But there were so many people living in that house, man. There was my grandmother, my grandfather, there was me, my mother, Corey, my aunt, and another aunt, all in the same house, right? And that there was basically only 2 wage earners. Right? So
you had 2 families, essentially.
Yeah, well, 2.5 families living in one. And the house seemed big at the time because that's what you grew up in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But do you guys remember those challenges with food back
Absolutely.
in the day, man?
Yeah. Well, I had 2 incomes as well, and my mom and my stepdad. They were both in banking, but my mom had some health challenges earlier in my life, so then we were down to 1 income. So that's when things became tougher.
Yeah.
For us, and so having 1 income, and it was an average salary, I guess. But having 1 income on an average salary, trying to support a family of 4, wasn't ideal. Not that we were super poor by any means, but we grew up in a lower income area, and it was what it was. But it's what we knew, just like you say, right? So
yeah,
food was a challenge, though.
Yeah,
it was.
I remember, being raised by my great grandparents. I never really thought about money growing up. Never thought about it, and never really thought about. There always seemed to be things there. So it was like it was almost like shielded from the outside world, you know. But I could tell that we grew up in a blue collar neighborhood, and it was a small home. Lots of family members would come by all the time. But I don't really recall challenges that much as far as food goes. Like there always
Really?
seemed to be. Yeah, there was always a 50-pound bag of potatoes in the pantry.
Yeah.
There was always, I would say
yeah.
the same. It was
Like,
there's always food of some
food
sort,
was
but-
food never seemed to be an issue really, because I was always getting fed at least
Right.
that. And I
Yeah.
was the least of the worries. I mean, I was also very young growing up with my great grandparents, so I didn't necessarily see it. But as I got older, heading into my teenage years,
Yeah.
that's when the reality sort of set in, and realized that I was
Yeah.
a low income house, because I'm pretty sure there was only one, and I think my grandfather he was 73 when I was born, so he must have been already on his old
On
age
his pension, on pension, yeah.
and serving in the military. I think he got something from that as well.
Mm.
And I, being the head deacon at the church and running the old age center there, I think there was some sort of stipend kind of thing he probably got on a weekly basis. But he
Yeah.
always seemed to have money.
Yeah.
And we owned our own house.
Right.
It was, mind you, it was a 2-bedroom bungalow, but
Mm.
it seemed like on paper everything seemed like it was normal.
So Jay, though, when you were growing up, though, just like me, there was a lot of people in that house, though, right?
There was, yeah. There were times when I was a young kid. I remember sleeping in a drawer dresser as a
Yeah.
bed.
Really?
Yeah, because I was small, right? And then I can remember, the cousins would be messing up and trying to push the doors. I must have been 4
That
or
was
something
before
like
the
that.
futon was invented.
Yeah, that's very much so. And get off my futon. But anyway,
That was like, I get off my couch.
yeah, get off my couch. Yeah, I was trying to make it friendly, but yeah, no, there was lots of that, and there was always, in my younger years, there was always lots of people there, a lot of people sleeping on the floors and sharing
Right.
one bedroom and everything like that. But it seemed like there was so much. Even D, you said it seemed so much bigger in your house, but I don't want to sound corny, but it seemed like it was bigger because it was filled, like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it was filled with people and action and
Yeah.
all these things, and I do remember those memories from childhood.
Mm.
Yeah,
I think you don't realize that I think the term's called food insecurity. That's what they call it, right? But I don't think you realize how insecure you are about the next meal until you're older and you realize, shit, there were points where I was eating oatmeal 3 times a day. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
when I moved out when it was just me and mom, and I was like 8 years old, and we moved up here to Ontario, there were times where we ate oatmeal 3 times a day. But the thing is, like, in the moment, you don't realize you're young, right? And
Yeah.
and children are so adaptable that
Absolutely, yeah.
and we don't know. But then it's when you're older, like Chad was saying, like when you're older, you kind of realize, shoot, man,
Yeah.
Well,
and that's when it started to dawn. And the thing is, you start to realize how maybe not the high income bracket is, because you're eating a lot of the same foods that other people weren't necessarily eating. Like for us, it was like a lot of bologna. You know what I mean? There was always a hunk of bologna in the fridge, and there was whenever I
fried bologna sandwiches.
Yeah.
and childcare was you didn't because I used to go home at 5 years old and go in and eat my lunch, and I had a key around my neck. So say if back then, I guess they never thought about childcare like they do now, but I definitely guarantee we weren't in the market for paying for that, for me, if that was the case. And
I think I was the same. My parents, when they were both working, they they weren't home much, and so you go back and forth from school, and even aside from food, just in general, kids would be, when we were like 8, 10 years old, like we'd go out at 8 o'clock and come home at 10 o'clock, and you'd never check in, and nowadays that's crazy. You would never, parents would never let that happen.
Yeah. So when was that moment that you kind of, because we're talking about how when you're in it, you don't you realize that it's a low income household. But when was that moment that you said, oh shoot, man, I grew up differently than some of the people that I'm around? Do you guys remember? For me, it was I think I was talking to you about this, Jay. I had a friend in I think it was like grade 5, and we cleaned out a room in my grandparents' basement, and I used to invite him over, and I said, you should come over for lunch, and you say, yeah, sure. But the thing is, though, Mom used to give me like $1 for lunch, and I used to go and get like fries at like Randy's fish and chip shop on a Grigula there. I used to get fries for lunch.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember him telling me, yeah, I can do that every now and then, but my mother wants me to eat real food. I think I was like, oh shoot.
Yeah.
When was that moment for you guys, man?
I think probably 2 different scenarios. One is when, for the most part, we always had food of some sort. It wasn't that big of a deal. Sometimes the fridge was fuller than others, right? But I remember finding taco shells and flakes of ham and trying to make a taco with flakes of ham because that's all that was there at the time.
Yeah.
So that was one thing I was like, yeah, I don't know if that's quite normal, like thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then I'd say another time is when, me and Jay started going to school at Springvale Junior High.
Major Stevens.
Yeah. I think that was a time where you'd see, in a better neighborhood, and you'd go to your friend's house for lunch in their neighborhood, and you would see, okay, this is how the other half live, so to speak. So that was eye-opening, I would say, for me.
Yeah, I would agree, Chad. Like stepping into Springvale, the houses all of a sudden got bigger. And then
gigantic.
Everyone like the middle, like Springvale was a middle class neighborhood, mostly predominantly white, and considered upper class, and people were dressing differently. And all of a sudden, you could get away with it in elementary school, that hand-me-down, but I felt like, oh man, how am I going to fit in here? Everyone looks so crisp, and new shoes, and new sneakers. Yeah, man, like new shoes and new sneakers. And I remember for me and Chad, like whenever we got a pair of sneakers, it was like, oh man, we'd be celebrating outside playing basketball like we just won a war. You know what I mean?
You would play better ball. You would feel better about yourself when you had new things. But I think being exposed to that neighborhood kind of opened our eyes to say, we want more than what we have. Right. And I think for me, it was, I couldn't afford to get those new sneakers and stuff. So my brother had a job. So anytime he had new kicks in the house, I would just steal his sneakers. And even though there was like, instead of size 8, it was size 11, I'd still wear them. And we'd get in a big fight later on. But I wanted to fit in that neighborhood. And I think even till this day, you think back to, those insecurities when you're in junior high, and some of those things still exist. So that, in today's life, you're still thinking, I always got to have food in the fridge. It's always got to, have lots to eat, and it affects you now for sure.
It's a long-term thing. Like you never really sort of, from your humble beginnings, sometimes you're still that person inside, no matter what. No matter how much success you attain.
You definitely are.
And walking into like sort of, I used to go to this guy, Rick's house all the time. And you walk into his pantry, and there was just like all the junk food that, every once in a while we get like at home be some cookies or some pound cake. There was always, but you walk in his, there was chips and cheese and the wagon wheels. Stuff. Yeah. And just like all this, the world of processed food. But back then to us, like these are all the things that we saw on commercials and, watching cartoons, and man, damn, I wish I had a bowl of Lucky Charms, instead of, shredded wheat.
The difference is that stuff would last in his house. It wouldn't last in my house.
No,
Yeah,
of course
'cause-
That'd be
yeah,
gone in like a couple days.
Yeah,
Yeah, the new
because
if
stuff,
it's there,
yeah.
it's gone.
yeah,
Pounced
that's
on, yeah.
that's the mentality. Be like, we better get this now, or else it's
Yeah.
going to be gone. So it's that thrill of having it in the moment. Because I remember going grocery shopping with my grandparents. I would always try to convince them to get this, and they'd go sit down.
I think all kids did that.
Yeah. No, that is interesting because in my grandmother's house, she was always baking, right?
Yeah.
So there was always like apple pie, there was bran muffins and all that sort of stuff. But then to have the prepackaged stuff, that was the stuff that you're right, we didn't have. Thinking back, that's very true, man.
Yeah,
that's very true. Now, I think in high school, like integrating with all those South End kids. Looking back on our discussion, we failed to explain the delineation that existed in Halifax at the time. The south end of Halifax was very rich, very white. The west end of Halifax was working class but mostly white. And the north end of Halifax was again working class but predominantly black. These neighborhoods all border on a huge set of sports fields called the Commons. Near the Commons is where our high school, Queen Elizabeth, was located, and a cross-section of kids from all these neighborhoods went to QE. Sometimes it wasn't a smooth thing. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like we didn't have a lot in common with some of these guys. Like even though I think we kind of floated in and amongst these South End kids pretty well, and we were invited to the parties and stuff like that. But looking back, we didn't really have a lot in common with them, huh?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I think over time, as you develop friendships,
Yeah.
we wanted to be more like them, and maybe they wanted to be more like us a little bit. So that's how friendships developed in the high school years. And just people that, were brought together over sports or different things you had in common that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were also adaptable to so in social circles, pretty much anyone you put us in, like we'd be the group that would just be off, but people would be like, oh, those guys are kind of cool. So on the peripheral, that we'd be there because we were fun, we were funny, people loved hanging out with us. So I think, Chad, you're right about the friendships that eventually took over. But did you guys ever think you had to be someone else in order to get their attention, that you in a place where you didn't feel like you would be accepted? You know what I mean?
I think to a certain degree, yeah, because I remember in high school, you would dress differently. And I think my brother was the same way. It's like, I don't know if it was a little bit preppy or whatever, like you're wearing polo and all these different brands, but I think, again, you're trying to fit into where you were at the time. And I definitely think I would be dressing, trying to be more like, I want that for myself later in life. So I was trying to, emulate what they look like a little bit, I guess. And as opposed to, where we grew up in Cowie Hill, Jay, and Klein Heights, I don't know if many people were wearing like big name brands and stuff like that. You couldn't afford it.
Maybe Levi's.
Once in a while you could, maybe at Christmas time you get one or something like that.
Yeah, there was always an outfit that you wore on Fridays. You're dressed up. Everyone
first day of school.
First day of school, and then Friday for some reason everyone was dressing up like some weird fashion shows. But I know I was in there. I was doing up my hair and and everything like that, and had a couple pairs of nice clothes. But also, my grandparents, just because of the involvement in their church and everything like that, clothes appearance was always very important.
You had your Sunday best, right?
You
had your Sunday best.
But
it's I don't think I ever paid high school. I didn't pay attention. I think I was I was just doing my thing, man. And I wore jock stuff all the time anyway.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Sweats in his jogging pants.
Yeah, jogging
when you were just
pants.
playing football all the time.
Jock,
that's right.
Yeah, like sweatpants and all that sort of thing. And I don't think I ever came out of that because according to my wife Vanessa, like I still dress like that. But,
Oh, I definitely do now.
Yeah, it's funny
When I
though.
was younger, I wasn't, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
when I'm
grew up.
older,
We grew
yeah.
up in an era of name brands too. Like, so that's
That
what hit
hasn't
us in our
changed.
face. No, especially when we started following basketball and all those things, and we wanted Nike and we wanted Reeboks and Pumas and everything like that. And I also wanted all that stuff because it was cool. Because I was always sort of into breakdancing and hip hop and
Right.
sort of always wanted to emulate that b-boy style. I often couldn't, but I would often have a good pair of sneakers only because I played a lot of sports, which I was happy for, because my grandparents allowed me to at least have that, if anything, because it didn't really cost a lot of money other than maybe membership fees or something at Dalhousie that we used to go to all the time.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought that up, Jay. I was just thinking about sports, and when we were younger, though, I think that's a big difference between us and neighborhoods like Springvale and the South End was our families couldn't afford to put us in like the basketball camps and all hockey camps, all these different things that so you didn't grow up in the system where you would be able to foster your skills and develop and be able to get on better teams. And the kids that are growing up in these other neighborhoods, they had all the programs so that they were able to develop and succeed later on when they're in high school and university years.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, Chad, because the Bantam Ball football club that I played with, the Chargers, they were seen as probably one of the best development programs just before high school, right? And there was a bunch of kids that came in from everywhere else down to the North End to try out for this team. God, I forget his name, man. Last name was Boyd.
John Boyd
came, and I played Bantam Ball with him for like 2 years.
Right.
And his father brought him down there because of the coaching of that team, right? And everyone else were just neighborhood kids from the park.
Yeah.
Except for John Boyd, and there was a couple other kids. I forget their names, man. But from the South End and in the West End, like just coming down to play ball and learn, so that they could then move on to a good high school program and then eventually university, right? So they could afford to bring their kids in. They would drive their kids into practice every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. If it was somewhere else, it wasn't happening for us. So
no,
we had a car back then too, but it was from time to time would always be broke down. So you couldn't always rely on transportation either. Because I mean, when I was younger, I had to take the bus everywhere. Even into university days, I didn't have a car, so I was riding my mountain bike everywhere because that was the best mode of transportation that I could afford at the time.
That was all three of us, though. We all had
mountain bikes all over and I miss those days. I really do. I used to. I tell my kids all the time. I said I used to mountain bike from Smew up to Clayton Park to wherever.
Yeah,
and I said it didn't bother me at all. I was fine with it.
Getting to
now
Price,
it's like no.
Yeah, getting to Price Club through the industrial park and everything like that.
Lacewood Drive,
going down
Lacewood.
Going to meet Dee down at the tennis courts there.
Oh yeah,
at the Commons. We were riding everywhere, man.
Yeah. So Chad, want to ask you though, because we both have kids, right? Do you see any type of behaviors that have kind of folded over to your kids from your upbringing when it comes to living in? Because we're not in low income households right now. Like we both earn a substantial amount of money, and we've been able to do things for our kids that we didn't have, right? But do you see any like little behaviors or attitudes that have rolled over? Because it's subconscious, right? The way that we act.
There's 100% this carryover because in my life now, it's like when I was younger, I didn't have the money to get all the best sneakers, so I have to like grab my brother's and hope he wouldn't find out or whatever. So now it's like I have some sneakers, and now I see my son. He's got like this addiction for Jordan Lowe's and all these other. And he spends way more money than I do. Like I don't want to spend a lot of money on sneakers. Once in a while, I'll buy something, but it's always because it's a deal. Like I don't want to pay regular price for anything.
Yeah.
but he's different. Like he'll be like, if he has savings, he's like, no, I want those. And he wants to have that. So I think he got that for me, wanting to have things that he doesn't have. And but I think it's the culture today too, is they want all these names, and it's,
well, I mean, the world is run by corporations and brands that still up in your face all the time, and
right.
you just kind of want to keep up with appearances, right? When you do go out, you naturally want to look good and feel good, and I mean, the price point is probably a lot different than it was for us, but
Absolutely.
Still, I remember it was all relative. You know what I mean? I remember playing badminton. I wanted the best rackets and the best sneakers. But the thing that the difference being, which I think that carried on for me, was learning how to survive, even based off watching my grandparents do what they did. Like I started working young when I was, 15, 16 years old. And
we all had jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And, and then those wants even carried over because I had my job, but I didn't ask my grandparents for stuff like I did. Like I didn't want to bother them because as I got older, I was like, oh, they actually don't have a lot of money. So once I started making my own,
that's an interesting point,
I started, I mean, working at the gas station, I made $100 a week, but I didn't pay any rent, and that was a lot of money back then, right? So,
so you think it was like when you were 15 when you realized that, oh, we're not in a great predicament now, and maybe I do want more, so I'm gonna have to work. I'm gonna have to do something. And when you're younger, like when we were talking about earlier, like you don't notice that because you're just you're just growing up. It's all you know. But maybe when you hit those years, that 14 to 16 range, it's like, oh yeah, we don't really have that much money, or something's changed in your family and your lifestyle changed a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting though. That's probably why we got our jobs and we started saying, listen, we had some drive, because if I want these things, or if I want to do something, I'm gonna have to work. It's on me, right? So
but I don't know if that was a positive thing, because there were like, for example, the three of us I think we can blame Chad for this because you got the paper route first, right? Like an adult paper route, man. I know there was a point where we're saying, okay, we got to earn money, but we were probably earning less than minimum wage.
It was ridiculous.
You're just happy to have money.
Happy to have money, but like that drive to work no matter what, like and not valuing our time. That's a detrimental thing though, man. Like and that did transfer into adulthood. There was some jobs that I had that I'm working overly hard for a little amount of pay, right?
I agree with you. I don't think until my 40s I realized, that adage of working smarter, not harder, was something that you should focus on. Because I think when you're younger, and I don't know if it has anything to do with how you're brought up or your income in your family, but when you're growing up, I think you're, as a young professional, you want to make an impression, you want to work hard, you want to try to climb the ladder or whatever. I don't think until my 40s I realized, like, that's not the way to do it. Like, and I wish I would have known in my 20s that that's not the way to do it. So that's what I try to teach my son now. It's like, you don't have to work crazy amount of hours. You just have to be smarter than the next guy, and you have to come up with a different way of approaching something.
But it's true though. But I think the way we were raised and the way we grew up, I think it was just instilled in us to work, and the fact that we didn't have what we didn't have growing up. I think our instinct was survival, and if we could just survive and do what we want, things would come to us, because we had each other, we had our jobs, we were pretty productive 20 years olds, and we were very busy, but there were some things we missed out on that we could have probably paid a little bit more attention to. But it was all about how can we make our lives better than it was before, even though we got all the what our parents could give us or grandparents could give us. They gave us what they could give us, and they instilled in us an ability to survive. But sometimes lower income people, they, like you said before, Chad, you don't always get the nurturing you need to follow some dreams or aspirations, but you do get that subconscious thing, I'm going to survive, I'm going to survive. And I think
Right.
that can take you, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but that's what takes you,
No, it's
that
good.
can be a guiding force in life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
not everybody has that either. I think some
Yeah.
people, you know, they just stay in what they know,
Yeah.
and
but I
that
also
happens
think it's,
sometimes as well.
yeah, and I also think it is detrimental in some ways if you
Oh
look
yeah,
at it
definitely,
from that
man.
lens, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So,
Like I was
Mhm.
talking about the subconscious thing and the lasting effects of coming from a low income household. And like the other day I was trying to take my daughter to lunch because she had the day off of school. And I was like, you know, she was chilling. And I said, you know, let's go. We'll go to St. Lawrence Market. And she was like, oh, you don't have to spend that money. And I'm like, it's just lunch though. You know, and then I was thinking, geez, man, what have I subconsciously said in the past that might bring her to the fact that I don't really want to pay for something little as lunch, right?
Mhm.
You know, and
It's interesting too because like she's trying to tell you she save money, and
yeah,
I think that's one of the things that I would say to my kids too. Like now, it's like save your money, don't buy a
mm,
lot of stuff. You know, if you need something, or if you want, you know, for a present or something, if you want a pair of sneakers, like it's no problem. But I said your own money, like that's what I want to try to give to my kids is like save money and try to
mm,
start off because I mean me and you, D, we had big student loans, so
yeah,
I didn't want my kids having student loans. So I'm like, put your money away, get
Mhm.
good grades, try to
mm,
get a scholarship, and you know it's my kids have been you know I guess grateful, and I think they understand the adage of saving a buck or two, and my
Mhm.
son maybe not as much as my daughter, but um, he comes by it honestly, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
But also collectively, like even like our, the children, look what's going on in the world, right? Like, inflation, everything like that. And they may not know how much money you guys have, right? And they know
yeah,
they've always been, taken care of growing up. But at the same time, in the outside world, prices are going up everywhere. So that's also a thing that collectively, whether you're an adult or whether you're a child, we still see that how the world is suffering. So I think that kicks in, which is also a ripple effect of how we
that's
were raised
really
anyway,
really good point because
Yeah.
my kids are growing up in the era of spending, right? So
mm,
that's why we're dealing with all this inflation and we're trying to raise all the interest rates now. But they grew up when everybody was spending money and the interest rates were like 1%, and like my mortgage
yeah,
is like 1.4%
yeah, yeah, yeah,
for
Mhm.
the longest time. So it it's crazy. But now it's I think things are turning around. Like both of my kids have to put gas in cars. So they're recognizing, wow, this costs a lot of money. And then
yeah,
it's and my daughter now, she saves a lot of money. And she's like, I only do things I have to do, and I'm going to
yeah,
save my money. I know I'm going to be on my own soon.
Mhm.
I'll have a job, but I have bills, and she's living on her own now, so she's
mm,
starting to see it. My son's not quite there yet,
yeah,
Mhm.
but he will. I mean, he'll see it soon enough.
Yeah,
yeah,
and we all kind of had these like kind of responsibilities at a young age, like even in our early 20s, man. Like
Yeah,
some things, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of the people that we grew up with or went to high school or were in different income bracket, they might not have been through what we've been through, and whether we know it or not, what we've been through will pass on to our kids some way, in some weird osmosis
yeah,
way of, you know what I mean?
and I think it used to affect me when I was younger,
yeah,
where I was insecure about it.
hmm,
But now I don't care because I've done okay, and I'm not worried about what other people think anymore. But I
yeah,
think when I was younger, I did, and I think that goes back to our younger days of going to neighborhoods that there was so-called rich kids,
yeah,
and we were trying to fit in, so to speak. And maybe not everybody was doing that. I know I was for sure.
Mm.
Trying to wear better clothes and trying to act a little bit different, like
Mhm.
but anyway, I do think people probably, oh, where are you from and where'd you grow up in Halifax? And you say, oh, I grew up in Spryfield, and like, and then that's the end of the conversation, right? So you can already tell that, oh, okay,
yeah. Yeah,
anyway,
it's interesting, man. Like running in different circles and it not that it's a detrimental thing, Chad, but like you can if someone says, where you're from, you could actually say, instead of I'm from Halifax,
That's
Right.
true. Yeah.
right?
You know what? I think I used to say that, but now probably last 10 years, if somebody says where I'm from, I say I'm from Springvale
Yeah.
because that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
Because it's Halifax, I mean, as it's not a big city, but as we know, there's different areas. So
Oh, yeah,
you grew up in
definitely.
Dartmouth or Cole Harbor, you grew up in St. Margaret's Bay Road, where I used to live for a bit with my family, right? So,
Mm.
and I think even a little bit of insecurity comes out when you say later on in my life,
Mm.
and I spent some time on Quimple Road trying to make myself look better. And I knew I was doing that, and I was like, why am I doing that? And
yeah,
at one
exactly.
point, and then at one point I said, screw it. Like, I don't care. Like, I
Yeah.
grew up in Springvale. That's where I'm from. So it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, we're afraid to be judged,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
and
Yeah,
we want to fit
100%.
in. I was always trying to be the funny dude that people would just like having around. That was my coping mechanism, and I blended in all worlds well. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely, you did.
I'd go to Springvale. Man, 3 or 4 people would come up and say, Jay, you want to come to my house for lunch? Jay, you went every day. I didn't even have to worry about, God bless Evelyn, my grandmother, Evelyn Soul. She wasn't a very good cook, not even sandwiches. So I was like, yeah, man, like, let me keep this sandwich, that boiled ham sandwich away. And I'll go to Rick's house and have a wagon wheel and an egg sandwich for lunch. What the heck? That's what I was like, wow, this is some gourmet stuff. Yeah. But, and that's how I adapted, to fit in, Chad. Like, like you say, that's who I tried to be. I tried to be everyone's likable guy, and everyone could come to me for anything. And it worked for a long, long time until it didn't work for me. It worked in those situations, but really, in the end,
as you get older, like,
you're just like,
you got to be happy with yourself, right?
But it's so funny of what we do to adapt based on from where we came from to fit in. But those all our kids are going to do it. Our families, our relatives, we've all had to do it in some shape or form.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think growing up in the neighborhoods that we did, I think it helps us. We had to struggle a little bit. We had to work when we were young. And it gives you a good work ethic, and you want to strive for something. And if you lose your job and you need to pick up another job, like, some people it would kill them.
Yeah.
And I think from what we had to go through, I think that we're better prepared to be able to pick up and start over again.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Like right now at 50, no, I don't want to do that again now. But
yeah, no.
But mental fortitude is something I think, that sort of was passed down to us. Like, I can look at my grandfather and go, that guy was strong mentally. And I think, I try to emulate that, if anything, you know what I mean? Because, when I can remember when he was in the hospital, he was getting me ready. He was prepping me. He would start telling me things, and we'd have these talks, and he was teaching me how to be a man. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I listened and I observed. And
how old were you then?
I was 20. He passed away when I was 21. Right. So, and I had already kind of been on my own 2 years prior to that, because he'd been living in the Camp Hill. So I was taking care of the home. I was paying the bills and all this sort of stuff. So I was in this place, and then he started whispering things in my ear, telling me some of the things that he went through. And, it was the mental fortitude that I knew he had, despite whatever he went through in his life. Now that I look back and have examined his life and recall some of those stories, I'm like,
he had enormous strength. Yeah.
How did you manage? So, if, like I said, that's why I'm so proud of you guys as friends, of what you can pass on in that way to your kids, because you both had to have a lot of it as well. We all did. Right. So
honestly, I wouldn't change anything.
You wouldn't change anything?
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't want to change anything.
Yeah.
Because like I said, you had to struggle a little bit. I mean, that's one thing I worry about my kids a little bit. They never had to struggle. They never had to do anything.
I know. Huh?
So, but I think, me and Renee, we both came from that same background. So I think we're both there to keep them steady and guide them throughout their life, all their phases, when they're kids, and, when you're, playing with other kids and somebody wants to fight you, don't start fights. I tell my son to finish them, but don't start them. But as they get older, it's like you save you have a job, save some money, spend a little, but save. And me and Renee have been saving since our 20s, and we're trying to get our kids to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But I that's the only thing I worry about is I don't want to change anything from how I grew up, but I also want to try to take some of the things that I learned over the years and give it to them so that maybe they don't have to struggle as much, but they are aware of what they need to do to succeed at the same time.
Yeah, that struggle and that life experience kind of thing, right? It's it is a
and they're not
worry.
and they're not gonna know it until they get on their own. Because
it's true. They have to experience it. It's but to have the positive thing is that to have that safety net of you, right?
Right.
Where
they know and that's the thing. They know they have that. That's
I just don't want to come across as parents not being there, which they were in full effect, or in
everybody's situation was different,
or in the ways that they could be. You know what I mean?
Well, no, they were focused on survival.
Exactly.
Next meal and paying for putting a roof over our heads. Yeah, definitely. This is definitely just like we've been able to get to a point where that's not an issue.
No, I know. Right?
I wasn't worried about the money part of it. I was more concerned with, having somebody to guide me. Like, my father was non-existent in my life for the most part. And so I had a stepdad, but he was almost non-existent, even though I lived with him. So it's, and then my mom, of course, she did everything she could, but you're missing that male guidance, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of families can kind of relate to that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think, Chad, that's why we spent so much time together growing up. Like, you know what I mean? Outside playing sports. Cause my grandfather was always around, but he was always involved with the church. Well, up until
he was busy.
Into his 90s. Like that was his thing. And there was no way nothing was coming in between that. So our male role models were, our older brothers or the neighborhood people or the people
on sports teams
that we learned to play basketball from,
or maybe a coach or something. I remember was it Pat Dunphy at Major Stevens?
He was.
You had a lot of conversations with him. And he probably same thing with you with football and stuff at QE.
They just there was a lot of people, including my stepfather. There was a lot of male people that were around that stepped into that role, right? And I don't fault my father. Father being a parent is hard. It is not for everyone. So
you say fatherhood is hard.
It is.
I'd say fatherhood, the hardest day is the first day when you got to change that diaper. That was that is life changing.
Literally,
I had to hold, and you know what? I had 2 kids, and every time I had to change a diaper, I held my breath for as many years as I changed diapers. I wish I had masks like we do now with COVID back then.
Oh, cool. Anyway,
man. It's
all right. You guys have any closing comments about this subject? Low income household?
Not really.
No. It's funny how that I think the 3 of us, and including Chris didn't come from low income, but we bonded, in our high school days. And I married my wife who also came from a kind of a low income. So it's interesting how you can have lots of friends, but I think at the end of the day, you go back to where you came from.
Yeah, man.
And your friends and who you might marry and whatnot. So
it's true. Well, I mean, like you were saying, we might not have had the role models we needed all of the time, but not to sound corny again, we formed these bonds, right? That helped us guide each other. We always had each other's back, right? And we weren't bad kids. We were working. We were doing all these things. We had each other.
Taxes.
And and for us to know where we come from, we already knew what we each went through, and I think that always brings you together more, because you recognize, game recognizes game, and a struggle isn't so much of a struggle if you have other people who are struggling the same, and they're not going to judge you because of it, because sometimes you don't even want people to know what you're struggling with because you're afraid of that.
True.
Right.
Yeah,
and
true,
life is
true.
a struggle, but once you find your crew and your tribe, and know that where we came from was a good place, I think that's why the bond lasted so long.
True. Now we have to get everyone off to Vegas, man.
Yeah.
No, that's seriously, we gotta go.
Yeah.
Gotta go to Vegas.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, sip of breaking new ground, breaking new ground.
You have been listening to Down Home. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Breaking new ground, sip of breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, yeah. On a high plateau, from the one down below to the future of the funk, getting lost in the flow. Contact with the spot magex. Now it's time to flex with the force from the soul, reaching all aspects, getting deep, no time to sleep. As you reach your next phase, laying it all on the line. New trail start to blaze. It's a fire inside, a brand new path, breaking down the sum to one. Feeling free, I just laugh with the joy of
The song Breaking New Ground from The Breakdown.
Like magic prescribed, only to see the perfect blend, like a diamond in the rough, ready to drop a perfect gem. It's time to shine so fine, to see what you find. Revelation.